Imagine working your way up the leadership role, only to realize that simply being open about your sobriety could change how you're treated at work. For many professionals of recovery, that's the reality, and it's time to talk about it. In today's episode, we're digging in what it's really like to navigate sobriety in the workplace, from the challenges of stigma to the power of owning your story. If you've ever wondered how to balance your career and your recovery, or how to create a work culture that truly supports sober employees, you don't want to miss this conversation. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Welcome back to Sober Life Rocks. Today, we have a conversation that so many professionals in recovery can relate to. My guest, Whitney Cowell, is the Director of Strategy at Virago Marketing, founder of Sober Soul, and board member of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. She's also the host of the podcast Dry Conversations. Now, as an executive, she knows firsthand what it's like to navigate the corporate world as a sober professional. Whitney experienced everything from discrimination to full acceptance in the workplace. And now she's using her sober superpower to help others step into their own strengths and educate companies on how to create truly supportive environments. We're going to talk about the unspoken challenges of being in recovery at work and how to turn adversity into empowerment, and what businesses can do to foster real inclusion. So let's dive in. Whitney, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I just want to know, how long have you been sober, and maybe start with this whole story of what happened that you felt like you were facing adversity.
Sure. So I got sober in December of 2018. So I am happily marching through my 7th year today. And yes, so I'm very excited. It's been an incredible journey so far, and probably, as many could relate to, one of the most unpredictable experiences. As far as, the discrimination piece, there is a stigma. There is a vast difference in responses I've learned when you say I'm in recovery or I'm a sober person versus I'm an addict.
Mhm.
And those are the same. They're the same. Right now, I'm not in active addiction, but I there's a piece of me that is still, I'm happy to claim it, that is still an alcoholic. I just live a sober life today. And there is, I think, a lack of maybe education as to what that really means and how we can be supportive of one another. And I really think that that's the heart of where some of the negative experience, specifically in the workplace, really come from.
So, do you have any stories about some of the big challenges that you faced?
Yes, specifically in the workplace, I was at an organization that I was only there for a blip in time. Um, I was on this path trying to find answers, trying to understand what it meant to be sober. And part of that meant going to therapy. That's a really big part of my story. I know I'm
Mhm.
not alone in that, but it really did take a team and a couple of people with more knowledge than I had to really help me understand what that was going to look like for me, how to do
Mhm.
it safely and to better take care of myself. And this company moved me from one location to another within the same city, which is not a problem, was also not a choice. And because of the new location, I needed to get there a little bit earlier than the typical work day, which is fine. I'm an early bird anyways. And then leave a little bit earlier than what they had as the perimeters of like your 8 to 5. And that was to accommodate me being able to take care of myself and my mental health, and my overall well being, frankly. I was met with quite a bit of animosity over that. No, these are the hours that you've agreed to. Sure, in the location that I was in, I could have made that work, but the office is closed, and now I have to drive through a very busy town and a lot of traffic, and I can't sacrifice this. Um, they allowed me, they gave me permission 1 week to see what that would do. And there were whispers and really bad faces made at me as I was packing up to walk out half an hour early. Even though I had been there, I got there half an hour early that day. So I was still working the
Mhm.
same amount of time. It was just a very odd work culture to be in. And I think that was probably in my lifetime the strongest I felt is being just another number on the floor. And that was a really, really difficult thing to confront. And like I said, I did not last at that organization for very long. I really needed to be at a place that supported me taking care of myself so that I could show up as the best employee that I can be.
What's so interesting about that is that a lot of people don't realize that just a couple of years ago, the American Disability Act included people who are in recovery.
Mhm.
And so if you need to go to a recovery meeting or something to support that, they can't say no and they can't put any roadblocks in the way of your career.
Right.
But that being said, it still comes with the people side of it, right? The attitudes and the snarky comments. Or I remember, I was secretly sober for my first 18 years of sobriety because I was, you know, back when I got sober, there was a lot more stigma and none of these protections.
Yeah.
But when I first got sober, I mean, I needed to go to meetings a lot. Like AA for me, when I first started, was my lifeline. And so I would always go in the evenings, but at times I needed to go in the middle of the day.
Mhm.
And, for an hour meeting plus driving there, plus driving back, like that just wasn't going to work in my work environment. So I would leave, I would get there late, I would leave early, and it was a whole thing. It was tough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
And
completely relate.
some people truly don't understand that it is a lifestyle change. I remember when I started finding meetings and the programs that worked for me, because like I said, it was more than just one avenue that I had to take to really find my footing. Um, some people thought, oh, well, you just do that for a couple of months and then you're fine. And the answer was no, absolutely not. This is something that I'll need to commit to for the rest of my life. And it is a very simple program that I follow, but it is doesn't make it easy, I think, and it doesn't make it temporary. That's this is it's kind of like somebody that is ill that needs medication. They take that for as long as they are sick. Well, my brain doesn't just heal, my chemistry doesn't just change itself, and so I have to
Right.
do what I'm so sorry about that. I have to do what I need to do to take care of myself for, as long as I plan to stay sober.
Absolutely. So talk to me, fast forward, you left that company, wasn't a good fit. So
Yeah.
what have you found since then? How have you adapted? What has the reaction been like? Catch me up.
Yeah. So after that, an organization actually moved me out of that city to a different place, which was great. It's a city that with my family was referred to as the city that broke me. It's the city where I took my first drink, where I really made a mess and then carried that back home just a couple of hours away. So I said, I really believe at that time I was 10 months sober. I said, I really believe that this is going to be my redemption round. And I'm choosing to look at it that way. And I don't think anything's going to change my mind on that. So I moved and I did what felt very uncomfortable and told my direct report I am in sobriety, and sometimes that means I'm going to need a little bit of understanding and flexibility with my schedule. I'll never ask for it unless if it's an emergency. Um, but please know if I ask for it, for me, this is life and death. And I am not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say that. It just kind of is the nature of what I face. And
Wow, that's bold. How was that received?
he had no idea how to take that.
right?
But he was so generous about it. He said, "Well, are you okay? Can I do?" And I said, "No, my life is not an urgent matter right now. It's just that sometimes when really hard things are happening, or I'm in certain seasons of life, I may need more support. And a lot of times certain things happen, you know, I have to be accommodating with my schedule. I'll never be gone for more than like X amount of time, right? Factoring in driving and just doing some research in advance to be honest and accountable in that conversation, I think was really helpful.
Hmm.
And of course, he told his boss, which was kind of over our department. And from there, I think I was encouraged by a sober mentor of mine to then tell somebody in HR just to have myself covered. And
Hmm.
so I did. That actually was more uncomfortable because I didn't really have a relationship with that person at the time. And then she left a couple of months later. So that's just something I've taken with me in each of the roles that I've been in. I've been very honest with my lateral team and with my leadership team.
So, that being said, have there been those moments when you've had to sort of pull the red cord, and
Hmm.
how has
Absolutely.
that gone?
I experienced something that I won't go into all the details of it, but there are people in this world that don't have our best interest at heart. And I faced a situation um, as kind of a victim of another crime. And I hate using the word victim, but legally speaking, that's what it was of somebody's actions. And I don't know that had I still been in active addiction, that I would have made it through that. I was so confused and so overwhelmed, and there was so much grief and
Mm,
betrayal that I felt.
mm,
And so I said, look, something has come up, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to need to start work about an hour late um, for the next like week or two, and gave a very high level overview, kind of similar to what I just gave you. And they said, okay, that's fine, but your work needs to be done. And thankfully, I was at a position where I was on salary, so I could work on weekends. I could work in I could work the odd hours that I like to work. I could get
mhm,
up extra early that day. And some of that is having integrity, right? Knowing that I'm not doing this to get out of work or using it as an excuse. And for me, not sitting in those feelings and dragging it out, but really like I'm
mhm.
going to use this time to heal and to make sure that I'm okay and come back. And I did. And they really never asked any other questions about. I mean, everybody was so kind and empathetic towards me. I really honestly was not expecting that.
You know what I love so much about that is that because you had laid the groundwork in advance, um, it probably came across as a lot more like empowered that you were taking care of yourself rather than, like you said, you didn't want to be put in this position of being seen as a victim.
Right.
So it was a lot more about self-care than like, woe is me.
Right.
But if we don't lay that groundwork, if we're not open in advance, then when those moments arise, it could be kind of icky.
Right. And I think some of that groundwork also starts internally because I could say those things, right? Like I'm very good at saying things. I could say those things all day long, but if I don't believe that I'm not a victim of my addiction, I don't have to sit in that woe is me. I was dealt these cards. I never had a chance. Like I could really sit in that. And some people do. Um, that it's just building a cage around yourself and then wondering why you feel like you're trapped.
I love that language. Oh my gosh. Well, that's a great chance to sort of transition to something that I read in your bio, which is about this notion of being a sober superpower.
Yes.
I want to hear about that.
I think we all have superpowers. From my window looking out into the world, if somebody has made the decision to get sober, they've made the decision to choose life. They've made the decision to be honest and vulnerable. and keep walking forward, there are some people in this world that will never have to face those types of decisions. And I think that right there gives us this internal resilience maybe that we didn't know we had. And for each of us, that it comes out in different ways, our heart for other people and to help other people. You mentioned the program that you go to, and we have that in common. And how that shows up for me maybe looks different to others. But my heart bleeds for the youth that are
Mm.
transitioning into a really scary path, and I get to do things about that. For others, they find like their purpose in their work all over again, and they become founders of things, and they help people. I think that each sober person has a superpower, um, and it's not always the same one, but it's this extra piece of resiliency and determination and strength that
Mhm.
um takes experience, I think, to tap into.
Yeah, and that's not to say that only sober people find
Right.
resiliency and strength, but I my dad is not in addiction or has never had an addiction issue, but both me and my brother are sober. And both my brother and I work like actively towards keeping our recovery fresh and
Sure.
intact. And he said to me one day, he's like, I'm kind of jealous. And I said, "Oh, tell me more about that." And he said, you have this life today that you're constantly examining and you're constantly reflecting and you're constantly looking for ways to continue this growth pattern, and you're surrounding yourself with other people who are doing the same, and you're having meaningful conversations about real life and the real stuff going on inside of you, and questioning um your reactions to things. And he's like, I long for that sort of community, and I long for that sort of life. And I was like, well, here, Dad, here's a drink. Like, no, but seriously, I think that because for me, my growth was stunted at such a young age,
Mm,
both by being raised by somebody who was an active alcoholic and then myself following in those footsteps. I've had to work really hard at just growing up, right? At just learning the life skills that I didn't learn until my 40s. Um, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
right.
I wouldn't trade
And
it for the world.
and I think what you said is really important. It's that introspection. And from my experience, the hard work is the hard work.
Mhm.
And maybe that's where some of that resiliency comes from. I'm something that I've learned is I'm incredibly comfortable sitting in other people's discomfort and their sorrow and in their grief and in their hardship, and not trying to fix it for them. And I think a lot of us who are in recovery fit that mold, because we know how important it is for somebody to figure out their path, for them to feel supported and encouraged and loved in their mess without somebody trying to throw them a lifeline and pull them out of it. For most of us, if we're still sober today, then that means that we've had a village probably at some point be our crutch while we learn to walk, but at some point they say, you can walk now. And
Yeah,
that's, I think, the empowering, because you have to ask for that help. I can't make it to the finish line. I need your help. And then the next thing you know, you've got the people behind you that are pushing you. Don't stop. Keep
yeah,
going. You're almost there. You can do this. And and that, I think, kind of taps into that superpower as well. If, like I said, it shows up differently for all of us. And I love that yours is that introspective piece, because we are very connected to ourselves. We have to be. That's
mhm,
that's how we survive. We
right.
have to know what's happening in our hearts and in our heads. And we have to know when our hearts and our heads are disconnected, because that's very dangerous territory for us.
Yeah, stress is our trigger.
Mhm.
Yep.
100%.
So tell me a little bit about what is Sober Soul, this
Yeah.
organization of yours?
Yeah, so it's quietly living in the backgrounds right now. Um, I decided that I wanted to do something on my own. And I've always heard I'm surrounded by founders, just really intelligent people who've done amazing things. And I've had the opportunity to sit and learn from them. And they always say, it's the intersection of what you know best and what you care about. And for me, I was like, well, that's my walk with recovery. I just don't know another thing that I know more about at this point in my life. And so I wanted to create a safe space, a community of people who can help us navigate the world and specifically our careers sober.
Mhm.
There's, as we talked about, a huge stigma around, an addict. For me, I always thought an alcoholic was, a dirty person under a bridge with a brown paper
Mhm.
bag, not some 20 something that just graduated college. Um, you know,
Or high achieving executive.
Right. There's no way that fits into, I'm not, you're definitely not. You're so successful. You're married, all of these perceptions of what I thought it was. And like I said, I think a lot of the stigma and the perceptions come from just a lack of education. And
Mhm.
so creating a safe space for people to navigate the world, and that kind of shakes out in two ways. One is having DEI workshops with organizations to really pay attention to what that inclusivity piece looks like. A lot of times, cultures in different I would say in different industries, they're built around alcohol, right? Like the happy hour,
Mhm.
taking the team out for a lunch because they've hit their quota, the networking events for executives. That there's all these different opportunities and areas in each part of your career that have something to do with alcohol. And so, how do we, as a participant, how do I feel safe in that? How do I navigate
Mhm.
that? Where
Mhm.
who do I ask these really uncomfortable questions of like, I don't know what to do with myself in those situations. Like I'm comfortable being there, but I'm uncomfortable that I'm not drinking. And then from an organizational standpoint is how do we create alternative experiences for the people that are participating? How do we create that safety so that maybe they don't feel like they're fending for themselves when they arrive? Um, and that was one element. And then the other is anybody that's re-entering or entering society, I write the resume for them. Not a lot of people have taken me up on that offer just yet because it's a really new piece of what I'm doing. And Sober Soul just launched last year in 2024. But
Congratulations.
thank you. I really want people to know that your past doesn't have to define your future. And if you don't know how to approach the gaps in your resume, maybe you were in rehab, maybe you needed to take a break. Maybe you just were bouncing around so much and you couldn't hold down a job and it's really embarrassing to talk. How do we talk about those things? How do you have
Mm.
the conversation with your boss of saying, I'm a sober person? Anything having to do with getting started at a job or in your career, I want to be a support person. So that's really what Sober Soul is all about. And then on TikTok, I'm always just sharing little bits of what I've learned along the way. Not totally related to the brand, but that is technically where it all started, was on TikTok of all things.
And how does your current day job,
Mhm.
feel about you being like out there and doing these things as a
Yeah,
sober person?
I have a wonderful boss.
Yeah.
I'm on a very small team. There's a handful of us that make up the marketing agency that I'm a part of. And she's incredibly supportive. She and the team, they ask questions, they love to learn, and they understand that that's not my identity. It's a piece of
Mhm.
it, but that is not my
Mhm.
identity. And they're really, really respectful of it. Of course, what I do does not interfere with my day job, and I don't anticipate that being a problem. But again, it's that integrity. Hey, as long as you're doing your job, like I'm so happy that you're out here helping people. I think that that's wonderful. And that's
Mhm.
really as far as that conversation went. And I was like, oh, great. Thank
That's
you.
amazing. That's amazing. So, one more question before we wrap up, and that is this. If you are a sober person at an organization that's not
Mm,
more tone deaf, let's just say. I
sure.
don't think people are intentionally stigmatizing, but often
Sure.
tone deaf. Do you go to HR? Do you go to the leadership team? Like, I think that many times if people are just made aware, they're they're willing to be different and more accommodating, but who do you go to?
It's a really great question, and I think it depends on the relationships that you have in the organization. Um, Something that I tell leaders is it is incredibly important that you have relationships with your teams. Because when something like this happens, you need to be able to have an honest human to human conversation and it not feel like there is a power dynamic at play in that
Mhm,
conversation. And
mhm,
so my advice for any person that's trying to navigate that is um, go to the person that you trust the most at the organization and start there because that will immediately give you somebody that's on your side, somebody that's in your corner, and that makes you feel safe. Um,
mhm.
Unfortunately, not all HR departments are incredibly receptive of that. So maybe brush up on your employee handbook, understand the organization if you're not sure what they offer, what they don't offer. For example, I knew that I could take short-term disability at one of the organizations that I was at. I chose not to do that, but it felt really good knowing that that was an option. And that's how I approached HR. If I wanted to exercise this, what would that look like? What would I need to do? And then I felt
Mhm.
like I had choices.
Yeah.
Um, if you have a great relationship with your boss, if you're in a leadership role of any type, if you're a manager of people, I do think telling your direct report, whoever that may be, from my experience, they just want you to show up and perform well and to do it in a safe way.
Mhm.
They care about you as a person, chances are, and that has not failed me yet.
Yeah.
Um, that again, that's just my experience, and not all people are like that because again, we're all just broken people trying to navigate this world and find healing the best way that we can, and maybe that person isn't going to be the best option, but gosh, if you have a relationship with your direct report, I think that that is always the best way to start.
Yep. And then on the flip side, I remember the last corporate job that I had. Um, they were a monster, gigantic corporation, and
Mm,
there would be these edicts from on high that would come down. And there was an edict from on high that we were no longer going to have, for instance, holiday parties, because right, that was not being inclusive.
sure.
And at the rank and file level, there was all this grumbling.
Mm.
Right, we're not fun anymore. Like we look forward to that end of the year party, like all the
Mhm.
things. So from a organizational point of view, if they were going to make changes to be more sober inclusive, what's some
Right.
of the languaging around that you recommend that is not uh, pushing people into the no fun zone?
That is a very real problem, especially when the culture is built around or at least includes some of those activities. And I tried to have that conversation with an organization, and boy, it ruffled feathers.
Yeah.
Uh, I think from an organizational point, as with any major change, first and foremost, the conversations need to happen up top with all of leadership on the same page together in agreement on what that messaging is going to be and how it's
Hmm.
going to be rolled out to the organization. I feel like some people, whisper and then it trickles down this stream, but not that stream. And then there's anger and hurt over,
Hmm.
favorite. It gets a little messy. So that executive meeting first, and then rolling it down to the directors, and then they have a chance to evaluate their departments and how it's going to be received. And then I think
Hmm.
having you asked specifically about verbiage. I think letting people know for the safety of our employees, for the inclusivity of all types of employees that we have at this organization, because we are a diverse and dynamic group of people, we're considering alternatives to celebrating wins, to celebrating holidays, to show appreciation for the work that you put into your job.
Hmm.
And I think that that softens the blow when you say we're not going to happy hours, for our quarterly outing. We might be doing this other thing instead.
Right.
And if the organization is very communicative, which I hope that all of them are at this point, having a type of survey or engagement where employees can then have suggestions where they can feel like they're contributing to the conversation, right? Like the information rolls from the top down, but you need
Hmm.
feedback from the bottom up. That
That's
needs
right.
to be all of the contributors of the company need to be able to feel like they can contribute to that conversation too, and not just to the bottom line and feel like they're another number being told what to do. And then
That's
that
right.
goes to managers and then maybe directors, and then they have conversations. This is what my team said. This is what our department said. And then that is a really nice conversation between HR and leadership at that point.
And I'll give total credit for what ended up happening. The grumbling happened, right? When it was like, what? We're not going to have fun anymore. And what they said was, we're no longer going to have these big bashes, these big, gigantic parties. However, we're going to take the money that we used to set aside for that and we're going to give it to the smaller departments
Yes.
to construct something that would be meaningful to them. And so, like our group, we went off and we did paintballing, and it was amazing.
Fun.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
So
And
I think that there are constructive ways that that can happen
yes.
without it having to be such a Debbie Downer. And we at Sober Life Rocks don't recommend that people eliminate alcohol
Hmm.
from gatherings. Like, it's a matter of being inclusive, which means ensuring that there are other options and or setting up gatherings that aren't focused on the alcohol, like paintball or like I don't know, going on a hike together or doing something that is still bonding, because that's what we're all about, but it doesn't have to be where the bar is the focus.
Right. And to your point, I think it's incredibly important to say this isn't a this isn't a goodbye. Because it's a very scary feeling for people that they feel like you've pulled the rug out from underneath them, and nobody likes that feeling. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad with how your organization handled that, because not all of them do it that way. And I think having grace when we get it wrong, because again, some of these are just people in charge trying to take care of the people they're in charge of, and
Yeah.
we don't always make the right choices the first time. We may not say it the way that we meant it to come across. But acknowledging that and pivoting and being flexible, I think, is incredibly helpful in those situations. As an executive over a department, I was over the marketing department. My introduction to marketing is very much my day job. What I decided to do was, instead of celebrating with the sales teams, the rest of the go-to-market team, we voted on our own quarterly outings. And we had, every season was something different. So we had a day out at the zoo where we then had a half day. We've done a little boat rental and had like a picnic out on the water. We've done all kinds of very fun activities. And even if it is an activity, if you have a smaller team, something like the sips and strokes, or the paint and sip, or whatever, that is a very fun activity that I've done with a group of sober people. And
Hmm.
we got together, we went shopping at a little market together, got all of our snacks and our little sparkling waters, and had our own little like charcuterie setup. And it didn't feel like we were missing out on what the
Yeah.
table beside us was doing. That's another way to be
Right.
inclusive, and just allocate your budget in ways that pays attention to the entire group.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that so much. Whitney, you are just exactly the sort of people that we love to hear are out there in the marketplace. So I'm going to make sure that we include all of your contact information in the show notes. Is there anything else that I've missed that you desperately want to say?
Um, I don't think so. We're making a difference, one story, one conversation at a time. And so, if somebody is interested in sharing their stories, like, please join me on my side of the pond in the supply chain industry, where I'm trying to bring awareness. I feel like every industry feels like they have the most alcoholic,
Mhm.
mindsets and people that are struggling, which lets me know that there's just a lot of us out there. And I think the more voices that are that take the microphone, the more lights that we turn on, the more that we see that we're not alone and we get to hear other voices and stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's amazing. So I just think that this has been such an important conversation. Like your journey proves that sobriety is not a limitation, it's actually a strength.
Mhm.
So for those of you listening today, if this resonated with you, take action. If you're in recovery and navigating the workplace, know that you're not alone, that you can talk to people within your organization and you can talk to people like Whitney or people at Sober Life Rocks. And if you are in a leadership role, ask yourself, are you creating a culture where sober employees feel supported and included? And if you're ready to be part of the bigger conversation, Sober Life Rocks is hosting a conference next January called Amplify Sober Voices. This event is all about bringing together professionals, advocates, and change makers to reshape the way that we think about sobriety in work and in life. So get all the details and register at amplifysobervoices.com. Let's change the narrative together. Whitney, thank you so much.
Thank you.